Hey guys, today I'm gonna restring my guitar and then talk about my guitar a little bit too, because I have some people asking me about the instrument that I play, and I'm really fortunate to have a guitar by Robert Ruck. This guitar was built in 2001 and it's number 774, and I grew up, playing blues guitar and, kind of the standard American story, I think, of guitar playing. General guitar playing Stratocasters in a blues band near Chicago. And then eventually I met a great classical guitarist named Jaime Giscafre. And Jaime was a student of Juan Mercadal, who was also the teacher of Manuel Barrueco. And Jaime, like Manuel, knew Robert Ruck really well and always played on his instruments. And so when I went to graduate school in about, I guess it would have been 2001, yeah, same year as this guitar, I went out to Denver to study with Ricardo Isnola. And at that time I was playing on a pretty inexpensive guitar, and I needed something, like a real one. So I sent a letter. Back in those days, it was a letter to Robert Ruck telling him I wanted a guitar, and he had a wait list at that time that was probably like 3 to 5 years or something. And but because I was a little bit like inside the Ruck family slightly, he decided that he would sell me this guitar, which he told me he built for himself and had it at his shop, was playing it himself, and sent it to me. Yeah, I've been playing this primarily. This is my main guitar ever since. It's got a lot of hours on it. It's got a lot of miles on it, so it's not without problems. The top, you can probably see the top is changed shape a little bit over the years, but generally it's still working pretty well for me. The thing about this instrument is that I don't know if I found the perfect string for it. I used to play the Savarez Corum, which were nice, but maybe a little bit monochromatic. I couldn't get a lot of different colors out of them. They're very powerful strings, though. Ruck told me in later years, he told me that he would use the normal tension D'Addario, the EJ45s, as like the standard string for his instruments. He kind of thought of that as the neutral color string, and that if his instrument sounded good with those strings, he felt like the instrument was constructed well. Lately, I've been moving, and so I've been lifting a lot of boxes, doing a lot of cleaning, and my hands are maybe feeling a little bit fatigued. And anyway, right now I'm playing on these strings. My recent videos have been with these Augustine Imperials. Can you see those? And I like the quality of the trebles. And I like the strings generally. There's a lot of good things about them, but I'm finding that I'm overplaying the instrument a bit. So what I'm going to do today is put these EJ46s on. So this is like the heavier version of what I was saying Robert would use on his instruments. The EJ45s are normal tension, and these are the EJ46, the hard tension, they call them, instead of high tension. At any rate, for those of you who are curious, I'm going to just show you how I change strings. I'm not a luthier. I'm sure in the comments you could tell me what I'm doing wrong, but I'll give you some pointers about how I restring my guitar, and then maybe I can tell you more about this instrument as we go. A lot of people are curious about this guitar because Robert passed recently, and his guitars have always been in high demand, but now they're a limited resource and no longer kind of renewable resource, right? So what I typically do is I just choose one string. I'll just do the low bass string, and I take off one string at a time. This guitar has never been worked on by anyone except one time. So like I said, I got this guitar in like 2001, and I lived in Japan and I did a bunch of things before I eventually moved to Oregon, where I was teaching at Marylhurst University. And one of the cool things about Marylhurst University, which is now, by the way, is no longer in existence, they used to host the Northwest Instrument Builders Show. So instrument builders from all over the country, and some, I think, from Canada and things, would come to show their instruments. And when I became head of guitar studies at Marylhurst, this was like maybe 2015 or something, around that time, I went to visit Robert at his house, to visit Mr. Ruck at his house in Eugene, see his workshop. And I was a little concerned about my guitar because the frets were getting so worn. And when he first looked at it, he said, "Oh, these frets aren't bad. You don't need them replaced." But then he looked at it a little more carefully and said, "Ooh, actually, they have like a lot of wear." So he put new frets on there. And then he later told me that he saved some of my frets and kept them on his workbench because he'd never seen them worn so much. And I like to think that's because I practiced so much, but it might be because I was pushing a little too hard too. I don't know. But I mention it because at that time he put new frets on this guitar, but he didn't want to do any other work. There's a little bit of, if you look carefully at this guitar, by the way, this is how I string. So I tie it standard kind of knot, and then I try to guide it through, depending on the string manufacturer, I'll try to guide it through the hole twice. But with these D'Addario hard tensions, it's a little hard to get it through the winding peg or post 2 times. So I'll do a little bit of a standard knot. I'll show you what this knot looks like. I mean, it's not really a knot, but I just kind of go through the string like that. Can you see that? And then what's tricky is you want to leave enough space that you get some windings, but you don't want so many windings that they're kind of on top of each other. And you have to do it so that you wind towards the outside. So I'll show you. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. You do it so they wind towards the inside. But anyway, Robert Ruck was a super cool guy, and we had a shared interest in Japanese culture. He was, I think, a bit of a practitioner in terms of zazen, and I understand he was also into yoga, which I've gone through periods where I was pretty heavily into yoga. But Robert was actually, I think, more interested, from what he told me, he was more interested in flamenco guitar than in the standard classical guitar thing. He also studied with Juan Mercadal, so he was a pretty accomplished guitarist, I think. When I went to visit him, one of the first things I noticed was he had some Bach on his music stand, and so I think he'd been reading some Bach before we met. Now I'll bring the guitar up to pitch. And it's part of the problem with these nylon string guitars. They just sink. They keep sinking. You keep bringing them up over a couple of days. It's usually 3 or 4 days actually before I get stability. But when I'm in the initial kind of tuning phase, I'll just bring it up to pitch and then I'll kind of cycle back. Oh yeah. Here, I'll show you real quick. I'll show you what that looks like. So the winding on that low E string is towards the inside. And that's probably more winds than I need. But anyway, that's what I did just now. People also ask me, why do you use this? Or why is there like a post-it note, a folded up post-it note between your strings? And it's because I find that when depending on how I string the guitar, and even if I'm really careful about it, these resonances up here, if you're playing short staccato chords or something, I can sometimes hear these ring when I record, and it kind of bothers me. So I'll sometimes just kind of weave a piece of paper through there to dampen these, which might not be a great idea actually, but it's become a little bit of a habit. Sometimes the fourth string or the third string will actually touch this center part of the headstock between the tuning pegs, and then it vibrates and creates a weird resonance too. So if I'm ultra careful about how I restring, that shouldn't be an issue, but right now you can see how I wound those third and fourth strings up top. Can you see that? They're kind of a little bit too much on the inside, and so they'll touch this part and they'll get a little weird resonance. Anyway, so so Robert worked on this guitar, and then I played a concert at Marylhurst University that year where I played some Bach and some Milano and some of my own music on two of his newly built guitars. And it was funny because he only had two guitars to show at the Northwest Instrument Show. And so I wanted to play those guitars a little bit before the concert, so I had a sense of them. One was like a traditional top spruce, which was fantastic. And then the other one was kind of his double, or like, I think it was like a sandwich top with like Nomex or something, kind of a double top guitar, which was also a great instrument. But I told him that I felt that the spruce guitar was amazing. I wanted to buy it. Actually, I didn't have enough money at the time. But that the other guitar, although I thought it was a great instrument, of course, it had what I would describe as like a slightly granular quality to the sound. And I don't know if that granular quality came from the Nomex double top construction, but I assumed that it did. I use these to clip strings. If you do that though, they get like little burrs on there, and then they're not good for clipping your nails, but I just use this one for clipping strings. And here's a little tip that actually Robert taught me this as well. It's best not to pull, especially the wound strings, through the tie block this way, because you get a lot of friction, and you're basically like, over time, you're kind of sawing through the tie block. So it's better if you clip the strings and then you pull the string through just a short distance. Just a little tip there, because depending on your tie block, you know, it could have a limited lifespan. Okay, so back to my story about Robert. Oh yeah, so I played that concert on those instruments, and then he took this guitar, this 774, and that was the guitar that he was showing at the instrument show while I was playing the concert. So I think a bunch of people played this guitar and looked at this guitar. This was 2001, so I think this is before he ever went into the construction of a double top, or, you know, that composite top design. I'm not sure how many of those he built. I got the sense, I can't speak for him, but I got the sense that he did that out of curiosity, and, you know, because he was inquisitive about guitar building, clearly, but also just because it seemed to be like the zeitgeist and the market was shifting towards those types of guitars. I think he struck a really good balance with those instruments in terms of the traditional sound and, you know, the kind of some of the positive qualities of the double top construction. But I personally, if I had the choice of those two guitars on that day, I would have taken a traditional spruce top guitar. It was fantastic. I mean, it was like, you know, it was like Hauser-esque or something. It was an amazing instrument. And I told him that I thought that about those guitars, and then he said he was glad to hear that, because I think he still felt that traditional sound, a traditional top sound, was superior in a way. He didn't outright say that, but definitely got that feeling. So when I do these treble strings, I tie, I go through a couple times because I've had times when they slip. So I'll kind of go through the tuning peg a number of times, and then I kind of guide the string so that it winds again towards the inside, which can take a little doing. I might be leaving a bit more string here than I need. We'll find out. So by winding towards the inside, the string, the pressure of the string, the tension of the string, sort of pulls it so that they're more snug together. Okay, so maybe my A string is still in tune. The E is dropping down, like I said. I suppose I could do a whole video just about tuning, and what I'm doing now, this kind of harmonics tuning, is good for getting a rough idea, but is actually problematic because if you tune this way, you won't really be equal tempered, but the guitar is an imperfect instrument in terms of tuning, that's for sure. So I should tune to the 5th fret, bring this up to pitch, and as I'm doing that, I'm just making sure that I'm not getting too much like spacing between the winds, and then I'll double check down here. Do you see these? I'm going to show you these. Do you see the damage there by the tie block? That is from carbon strings that are slippery. There's one really bad gouge that happened years ago. And when I took the guitar to Robert, I was kind of, I don't know why, but I was kind of thinking that like him being like clearly a sort of perfectionist. I mean, his guitars are evidence of that. I was thinking that he would be appalled by the state of my instrument and that he would want to like fine-tooth comb it, restore it to its perfect condition. But he was like, he almost liked to see all the scratches and the dents. He was saying it just shows that the instrument was played and loved, and he didn't even want to mess with it. So I never did repair those. Now that actually is going to be in tune because this harmonic is an octave harmonic or a double octave. But if you've tuned like this before, your guitar is going to be perfectly out of tune in a certain kind of way because these harmonics, these fifths, are not actually like an equal tempered fifth. So we've done the outer strings. I'll continue. So at any rate, yeah, so there's lots to say about Robert Ruck guitars, I guess, and about Robert Ruck. Although, I mean, I didn't know him that well, but I was invited to do that demonstration concert, which I considered a huge honor. And then another encounter I remember when Manuel Barrueco came to Portland once. I'm not sure what year this was. Maybe it was 2015 or something. 2016 maybe. Could have been earlier. Manuel played an amazing concert, and then Robert invited me to go out to dinner with Manuel and his wife, and then Robert and his wife. And I got to spend some time with those two, and that was almost a surreal experience because I felt like those two forces combined, Ruck and Barrueco, in a way, kind of revolutionized the classical guitar. You know, I mean, it was a sound and an approach, I think, that was probably not since John Williams was there such an epoch-defining thing, you know. Like John Williams and Smallman would be a combination I would think of. Or maybe like Bream and Romanios or something like that. Segovia, Hauser, and then to me, personally, Ruck, Barrueco. So just to be in the company of those two guys at the same time was pretty surreal experience, but let's see here. So, yeah, my logic anyway about how I restring is all just from like my own crazy ideas. Like I said, I'm not like a trained luthier or anything, and I'm sure people could leave in the comments, could teach me some things. But I take one string off at a time because I feel like the tension on the top is least disturbed that way. And then, you know, instead of taking like all the basses off, and then you've got tension pulling just on this side of the instrument, it just feels like it's maybe not the healthiest thing for these delicate instruments. So I'll do maybe outer strings, and then I'll do 5-2 and then 4-3. Or sometimes I'll kind of go in the other direction, but this is what I'm talking about with the tie block. Like, don't pull the string through this way, because you're sawing through your guitar over time. So instead, put it through like this, so you're minimally abrasive with that tie block. And then, yeah, there are probably better YouTube videos to watch if you want to learn how to tie these knots. But I do it like that, and sometimes actually I'll use a little needle nose pliers to hold the string, and then I can pull in both directions, so I don't have a lot of slack on that knot. But do be careful with tools like that around your guitar, especially if you have a French polish or something. Or I think those double top guitars, right? Now, these D'Addario, at least on my guitar, these D'Addario strings, the 5th string is thin enough that I can get it through the hole twice, so that secures it, and then I'll use the winder to, like I said, wind it to the inside. And then I try not to bring it up to tension too fast. Another thing I don't like is to let the string drag along the nut friction point like all the way through. So I'll kind of pull on it a little bit so that I'm not just being really abrasive, sawing through that string. Let me grab my tuning fork real quick. Let's see. So this is an A, but I can tune the E to it just because I know what that relationship sounds like. And then I'll use the harmonics. The reason harmonics, I think, are so attractive as a tuning technique is that you can have both notes sounding while you crank on the tuner. But like I said, this harmonic, which on the A string is an E, it's not actually in tune. if we think of it from a equal temperament perspective, and we tune like that, it's really best just for getting it like really damn close, but not quite there, is what I'd say. Let's see, maybe we'll do that. Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, I've been detecting changes with this guitar. I think it's a lot to do with all the moving around I did and environmental changes. Like when I initially got the guitar, it came from, I think at that time, maybe Robert was even in Hawaii, or anyway, he was in Oregon or Hawaii, and he sent it to me in Denver, and Denver was like horrifically dry climate. So in Denver, I was humidifying it like crazy. And then when I moved to Japan, I had to dehumidify like crazy because Japan's climate is, especially, well, for like half the year at least, it's incredibly humid. And so all of that environmental change, and then coming back, then I lived in Portland, which was probably good for the guitar. It was like kind of like home because it was built, I think, maybe it was built in Oregon. Then I went back to Japan for like 5-6 years, and then Seattle, and now I'm in Iowa. But these instruments can only take so much, and I've put it through a lot. So the changes I've been detecting have to do with the sustain and the tone color, and then also I'd say just like, hopefully, we're going to find out, but hopefully some of it is string related, because I recently tried those Augustine strings, and I think what I suspect is that they're a little lower tension than these D'Addarios, and also the composition, the kind of stiffness or softness, relative stiffness or softness of the Augustine strings with my particular fingernails and this guitar end up sounding perhaps a bit harsh. So I'm going to see what these D'Addarios do for me. I think I haven't had these hard tension D'Addarios on this guitar probably for a couple of years. I was playing the EJ45s, and you have to play a little lighter on a lighter string, which is fine. But I don't know, not to knock Augustine strings, I think they're amazing, but I think they're maybe just a little bit whiny with my technique on this instrument in the trebles. So I'm hoping this helps. You might notice I kind of keep tension on the string because I want to, as I'm winding it, I don't want this to loosen and slip. So kind of keep that knot a little bit taut. Let's see, let's take the 4th string off. So at this point, I'm going a little faster, but I don't know. This is a video that's like not really about Robert Ruck and not really about winding strings. It's kind of just hanging out. I hope it's interesting. I always liked, if I think about like the guitar sounds I love, I always liked Bream playing the Romanios guitar. I like the sound of Boucher guitars. Of course, the Segovia Hauser sounds. And then I used to actually love the sound that John Williams got out of the Fleta. So I guess it's safe to say that I don't really prefer the sound of a double top guitar. But I can definitely see the appeal because, on this particular guitar, I have to work really hard to get anything approximating the kind of homogeneity of sound and the sustain, and like it's a constant battle, frankly. Not that it's a bad instrument, but it's just so particular in how it wants to be played, at least for, to my satisfaction. Whereas I suspect from having played some and having talked to other players, the double top guitars are more forgiving, and in a sense, in a certain kind of specific sense, they're less responsive. And I mean that not necessarily on a dynamic front, but like they might be a little bit more forgiving in terms of the nail angle of attack and things like that. So you can play them with a bit more abandon or variety of attacking and still get more of a homogeneous sound, whereas this guitar is really the opposite. I mean, you have to really touch this instrument in such a way, an exact same way, if you want that sound to be even close. Every note is like a different little bouquet, and sometimes that's really annoying. But it is what it is. It's the nature of the beast. I mean, I also prefer, actually, I guess my ear likes, there's a Segovia record on MCA, I think, and he plays some Baroque music, and he's playing like Handel and some Scarlatti. Sorry, I got a little. See, that's why I should keep tension on the string. It's kind of settling in here. I think it's safe now. Yeah, there's an MCA record. I think it's produced by Israel Horowitz. It's got some Handel, some Scarlatti, some maybe like even Telemann, I forget. Some Pachelbel maybe. And that particular recording, I'm pretty sure he's playing the Hauser. And just the way that it's recorded, it just sounds so great to my ear, but it also sounds real. A lot of the recordings these days on the double top guitars, I mean, they sound like a guitar, but they're so EQ'd and so filtered that they sound dark and pleasant enough, but it's almost as if, like, if you recorded a cello or a violin or a viola and you rolled off a lot of the high end with an EQ, I think most string players would say, like, oh, that sounds really dull. It's lacking in the shimmering upper harmonics. Like, why did you do that to me, Mr. Sound Engineer? But with the classical guitar, it's become sort of a thing where a double top guitar with a lot of high end roll off is sort of the standard sound now. So to my ear, that brightness, the brassiness of something like Segovia's Hauser and those older recordings is just really beautiful. But it's all a matter of taste. And yeah, everyone likes a different amount of salt in their stew. My students probably get sick of hearing it, but I always talk about like marinara sauce or something. Like, marinara sauce has very few ingredients, but depending on the ingredients and the balance of them and who's acting as a chef, you're gonna get a lot of you could get in different arguments about what is right or what is best. But I think the guitar's like that too. I mean, the strings do make a huge difference, but it's the string in combination with the instrument and with the nails, the length of the nails and relative softness or hardness of the individual player's nails, how much flesh they use, the length of the nail, where they play on the string. There's so many variables that it's almost impossible to talk about it. But you kind of have a feeling when you're getting closer or farther away from what your aesthetic preference is. And I think lately, as much as I like the Augustine strings, I'm thinking that I need to go a little heavier string, and I'm hoping these Didarios do the trick. You can let me know on my upcoming videos, because I'm going to have these strings on. You can compare them. I'm using the same basic mic setup, so it should be a more or less fair comparison. So, well, anyway, it looks like my third string is about to be on, and whoops, that's a little bit about how I string and a little bit about my guitar. I wonder what you guys think. I feel really lucky to have this instrument, and the way that I came to own it, I feel like it was almost, at the risk of sounding funny, it almost felt like I was destined to have this guitar. But I definitely, I was talking to a luthier just today actually about a different guitar, about the neck, and he said, I've never seen a perfect neck on a guitar. And I said, yeah, it's a bit like people, like we're all bent in our own way. Oh yeah, already I'm feeling that's better. You might wonder if I don't use the electronic tuner, or if you don't use the electronic tuner, you might be wondering, well, what's a better tuning method, Dan? What's better than the harmonics method? Let me just show you. So, first thing is get a reference, and then here's what I do. I actually tune with the harmonics from that reference. I'll get the E like this. It's better actually to get it here. Of course, these are all going out of tune like crazy, but I'll get like a rough tuning. And then here's an idea. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll play the 12th fret harmonic on the A string. So we started with the A string with the reference. I know it's already out of tune, but just so you can understand. So the 12th fret reference, this one, and you gotta be careful about how you press it. So that you don't put it too sharp, but that gives you a little bit of a reference for that. These fourths, sometimes I can just hear them, because the harmonic on D, one of the harmonics is A, and so, and then I can play these two open strings. These two. And then these two. And then you can test octaves like 2 Ds. Which again, these are going to just keep slipping out of tune for the next 2 days or something, but like these 2 Ds, or you could play these 2 As, or these 2 As, or these two E's, or these two E's, or these, or so I use a hybrid approach with harmonics and then octaves, and then I probably check it with an electronic tuner anyway. So to be honest. But anyway, I hope that was an interesting video, a little bit about the backstory of this guitar and my relationship to its builder, and then some kind of random advice from the player perspective about how I change strings. I think one of the things you want to just be careful about is that you don't damage the instrument. So watch for those string slips, and get enough ties here and get through the tuning peg enough times that you don't have any accidents. But anyway, thanks for hanging out. See ya.